Before I give the floor to the audience, I have to, of course, ask you about the current situation in the Middle East. I mean, we're talking about Asia rising, optimistic, but we have these terrible wars going on in other parts of the... And, of course, the headlines these days are all about Israel, Hezbollah, Lebanon, and Iran. How do you see this ending?
Well, you know, I've been studying geopolitics for 53 years. And, you know, and as you know, I make pronouncements on lots of subjects confidently, even though I may not know much about it. But I've decided very early on that there's one area which is a complete exception, which is the Middle East. Because in every other region of the world, I can try to understand the structural dynamics. And if I understand the structural dynamics, then I can more or less predict what's going to happen, right? The Middle East is a very strange corner of the world where if you can find the happy, peaceful way or the ugly, confrontational way, they'll always pick the ugly, confrontational way. I don't know why. For reasons I really don't understand. And that's why that region, you know, in my 53 years of studying geopolitics, there have been more wars in the Middle East than anywhere else. Wars, skirmishes, all kinds of challenges and so on and so forth. And absolutely no movement towards any kind of regional harmony. It's the exact opposite of ASEAN, the Middle East. And so, but I don't understand this at all. I don't understand what in the cultural DNA of that region leads to the highest level of dysfunctionality, whereby you cannot even have normal diplomatic relations among many countries. You know, which is the base. The base should be just normal diplomatic relations, especially among enemies. But that cannot be done. You know.
I think there's a...
And you know, by contrast, just to illustrate this, you know, when I was ambassador here in the UN in the 1980s, I spent my 5 years arguing with the Vietnamese ambassador at every General Assembly, condemning Vietnam for its occupation of Cambodia, 1980s. You know what? By the 1990s, Vietnam, which had been fighting ASEAN for so long, joined ASEAN. I mean, that's amazing. That's a miracle. Right? That's what we do in Southeast Asia. We take a long-standing enemy, we say, okay, now you're part of the family. That's it. You know, that's something as simple as that. Can you imagine the Middle East doing this? That's why there's something wrong in the cultural DNA of that region. And anybody who makes predictions about what's going to happen in the Middle East is very stupid. Seriously, because you believe me, that region will continue to surprise you. Because when you think you hit rock bottom and things cannot get worse, Middle East will always produce another rock bottom. That's how bad it is.
In the meanwhile, I think there's so much resentment and the sense of victimhood on all sides that have become so deep. And so it makes it very difficult to find cool-headedness in the midst of all of that to work towards a solution. But in the meanwhile, you have people being killed, suffering
very
on
sad.
a day-to-day basis. That's a rare moment when Kishore doesn't have an answer. But we have about 20 minutes for you to now ask Kishore questions or provide comments. So if there are hands raised, I will go to the young gentleman on the fourth row there.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Adam DePico. I'm a student up at Columbia, SIPA. My question is sort of based in the Indo-Pacific. What is clear, the stakes have never been this high with the increased tensions between the US and China.
Sorry?
The stakes have never been this high with the stakes never been this high with the tensions which have prevailed in the Indo-Pacific with the US and China.
US-China.
And my question sort of lies on what more can Singapore play in terms of a role to keep the guardrails of economic stability, given that if any conflict were to emerge, Singapore would no doubt be caught in the crossfires given the choke point of the Malacca Strait. Thank you.
Well, you're absolutely right. One of Singapore's biggest concerns is, not just Singapore's biggest concerns, by the way, ASEAN's biggest concerns, is being caught in the crossfire within US and China. And sadly, I hate to make this prediction because sadly many of my predictions about the rise of Asia fortunately have been correct. But this is, I'm going to make an unfortunate prediction that the US-China contest will get worse over the next 10 years. The logic is already built in. It's very clear that, and the United States has been very open about this, that it cannot accept China as a peer. So the United States is going to try and stop China, and China is going to make sure it's not stopped, and that the contest will accelerate over the next 10 years. It's going to affect all of us. And so what the best that we can do is for ASEAN to stay united and for ASEAN to send a very clear message, which it has, by the way, so far, to say that, hey, we want to be friends with the United States, we want to be friends with China, we don't want to take sides. This is a contest within the two of you, but we don't want to be, get involved in this contest. And so far, that message seems to be understood in Washington, D.C. and in Beijing. And ASEAN, by the way, also does practical things to make sure that both sides understand that we want to be friends with both. So in the case of China, ASEAN's trade with China was only $40 billion in the year 2000. By 2022, it had hit $975 billion, almost $1 trillion. It was the world's largest trading relationship in 2022. So we're sending a message to China, we want to be friends with you. And on the investment front, United States has invested more in Southeast Asia than in China, Japan, South Korea, India combined. So we are telling Americans, we want you here. We want to be your friends. Mm-hmm. So that's the message that we in ASEAN are sending, and we try to be as clear and consistent about it. And we hope that that registers in both Beijing and Washington, D.C., and that they won't force the ASEAN countries, including Singapore, to take sides.